So one down is... You ready at the back?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So here we are back at the Northwest Pinball and Amusement Arcade Show with our special guest Kevin O'Connor. Kevin has clocked up an amazing 30 plus years as a pinball artist, as well as doing work in other genres, and he has the rare distinction that when I put his name into the IPDB, it actually comes up with a comment, too many records to display. So that gives you an idea of how much Kevin has achieved in the wonderful world of pinball. And with that, over to you, Kevin.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. At this time, I'd like to invite you to join me as we follow a path that led a kid growing up in the 50s to a career consisting of over 3 decades of making art for pinball and arcade games. Next. The story of the young man in this cowboy suit is one about a kid growing up in a time before computers, cell phones, and what do I have here? It was a kid constantly called out by the teacher for daydreaming out the window or incessantly doodling on his folder. The kid would draw on your folder a World War II tank or maybe a battleship being attacked by a dive bomber for 25 cents in grade school.
So you started off quite early as a commercial artist.
Absolutely. And so I thought at that point, well, maybe there's something to this. One day we had a man visit the school. He walked into the classroom and announced that his job was a freelance artist. And he proceeded to describe what it was like to live the life of a freelance artist. And well, that was it. This kid was instantly hooked. And as far as he was concerned, his path was set. He would grow up to be a freelance artist. Next. Like most kids at the time, he watched a lot of TV, thrilling to adventures of Flash Gordon, Lone Ranger, Zorro, and later fantasized that he would live the glamorous life of the clever spy in the movies who traveled to exotic locations and always got the job done. And finally, he did. Of course, that kid in the cowboy suit was me. And when I grew up, where I grew up, we didn't really have arcades per se. You couldn't see too many arcades. And I lived in the far west suburbs, and it was kind of like the Wild West out there, west suburbs of Chicago, and it was pretty much like the gravel roads, and this is 1952, 53. We would spend all our days in the forest, imagining we were Robin Hood with absolutely no supervision. Parents didn't really have to worry about where you were, when you were going to come home, and that's how we grew up. Let's move on. Okay, in the middle of the 70s, after a few art classes in high school and junior college, I got my first job. I was actually packing boxes in a book bindery, and the foreman came up and we started talking. I said I was an artist. He said we're going to start an art department upstairs, and that's how I got started inking with a pen. As I was drawing parts for catalogs, nuts, bolts, machine parts, and finally I applied and got a job in a point-of-purchase display design studio. Let's move on. And that's where I did a lot of start out with a lot of my magic marker renderings. So everything we did was in magic markers, all the designs. Mostly, it was signs and displays, mostly for the liquor industry. But after a while, driving into the city became unbearable for me, my personality. And well, we can go to the next one and show another example of the kind of displays we designed at the time. And you could see the the style I used for my magic markers to get the metallic, start getting metallic looks and so on. And I applied for a job with a competitor in the suburbs, and I got the job. And it was there that I met a young Greg Ferris, who you might be familiar with. He was at the time doing production art, and we immediately hit it off as we were both musicians playing in bands as young men. I was actually playing full-time in a band, at the same time working full-time in the day and playing full-time at night.
So you play lead guitar, don't you?
That's correct.
Right. Yeah. Was that, I'm not sure what genre of music?
Little did I ever suspect that some 20 years later, Greg would be the drummer in my rockabilly band, and rockabilly is sort of a style of country and rock and roll, the beginnings of rock and roll.
Hypnose?
That was the Hypnose.
I've got the CD.
Okay. I don't have any more CDs, so. And little did I know also that 30-some years later we would still be working together, making art that decorates Stern pinballs to this day. And as many of you know now, Greg is the new art director of Stern Pinball, which makes me very happy to see him in that position. But after working at that company with Greg for a while, I just started looking just to move on, and I applied for a job that was in the newspaper. It was an illustrator job, and it said it was at the world's largest manufacturer of coin-operated machinery, and that's all it said. It didn't say what they did or what they made, and so I got an interview at the location, and I was greeted in the lobby by a very sturdy, broad-chested fellow who introduced himself as Paul Ferris. Someone else, another name you might also have heard of. He thought I would be a good fit and promptly hired me. I was once again driving to the city, but this time to a big company, and it was the legendary Western and Belmont location of Bally Pinball. I was officially a pinball artist, and we were in a very large area that housed also the slot machine designers, some of the people who were doing slot machine art for Bally slot machines, and we were over in a little corner, and there was really only 4 of us. And on my first day, I walked in, and there was really, I guess there was 4 or 5 of us there, but I learned much working alongside Paul and a quirky but very talented fellow by the name of Dave Christensen. And he was a very colorful character, but looking over his shoulder and watching him work just fascinated me. And, I watched him ink, his inking techniques, and watched him create Mata Hari and a lot of other games, and watched Paul create Evel Knievel. And soon I was asked to come up with art ideas for a bowling game. And so I started to develop art for my first game, which was Strikes and Spares. Other games of that time I went on to do art for were Mystic and Supersonic. I did a backglass for Supersonic. Someone else had been doing the playfield. It was the White brothers, who were actually they were slot machine artists that were interested in becoming pinball artists also. So the art department at that time consisted of Paul, Dave, myself, and 2 young ladies, Mary Beth Bush, and at the time her name was Margaret Gray. You probably know her as Margaret Hudson. She went on to do several games herself. Let's see, let's move on a little bit here. That's the famous Bally Pinball. It had that sort of a crazy modernistic guy juggling pinballs on the side of that. I don't know. Is there a name for him?
There is a name. It escapes me at the moment. Does anyone know?
No.
Okay. I know that, just as a side note, that character ended up in the ownership of John Popperduke.
Oh, John has it?
Had it. He's
Oh, he
passed
has
it on
okay.
to someone else. But I mean, it's massively tall.
Yeah, as you can see, it's quite large.
But it's neon, and he was intending to rebuild it. I'm not sure how much progress he made with that.
This location was
The Harlequin, that's what it's called.
Yeah, it was right across the street from a very famous amusement park in Chicago called Riverview Park. It's no longer there, but as children, our parents would take you there, and it had sideshows and just a lot of old-fashioned things there. Let's move on. There's Strikes and Spares, first game I ever did. Looks very primitive to me now, but at least I came in with some inking skills. So at the time we used the rapidograph pens, which is like a little needle on the end of a pen. And so I had enough skills to, and that had probably 9 or 10 different colors in it. And I used some of Dave's stippling effect to shade the legs and arms and flesh colors in there. Okay, we can move on. This is Star Trek. This is a painting I did. I was very excited to have the opportunity to work on this game. The only catch came during the production of this artwork. The first movie, Star Trek movie, came out, and the marketing department and everyone involved decided that they, I think there's a closer detail on this next one, yeah. I like their phasers look like glue guns nowadays. They decided they would need to put the uniforms on that they were going to wear in the movie. So I had to go in with a white material called gesso, and I whited out all their uniforms and painted in the new ones. So that was quite a tedious project, but it was pre-computer. That was the only way to change things without changing all the backgrounds or starting over basically from scratch. So that's the way we decided to do it. Okay, let's move on. There's the new uniforms that I painted on, and I still have that painting to this day. It's, I believe it's alkyd oil colors on masonite that I gessoed.
What size would the original be?
I would say it's over 30. It's a square. It's on a square piece of masonite. It's probably 36 by 36.
So that would be larger than a back glass.
Yes. Mm-hmm. We usually did all our art larger than the back glass. Mm-hmm. Let's see what we have next here. That's the original painting for Kiss. It doesn't have any of the border on it or mirroring. It has or any of the displays in there. And my original, I have an original magic marker sketch of that, which had less definition, and Gene Simmons got a hold of the sketch, and it was presented to them at a performance by Tom Neiman and Paul Ferris at a Magic Mountain in California, and Gene said, you know, he liked the composition and everything, but the fact that they weren't cut and muscular as heroes that needed to happen on there. So after Kiss, let's see what we have next here. During the
can I just ask you about Kiss?
Yeah.
I'm guessing you still have the original of
Yes,
that.
I do.
Now, with Kiss's popularity, have you been offered vast amount of money for that?
I have not. I've had I had someone offer me a substantial amount of money. He was going to drive down from, I think he was in Michigan, mm-hmm. and he just decided not to do it, I guess, for some reason or other. I've had Gene Simmons several times be interested in it. I actually met with him backstage at a concert that they did in Chicago, and he expressed great interest in it. He told me that how I had been laboring in obscurity for many, many years, and that he was going to really bring me out into the limelight, and and that that he was starting a museum, a KISS museum that was going to feature this, and it would be a like a focal point, and asked me what I wanted for it, and I told him it had a lot of zeros behind it. It had a 1 with several zeros behind it, and he said, "Oh, okay." So anyway, we went on to another subject. So later on, I had a friend of mine. I said, "If you're would like to sell this thing, try to sell it on eBay, then go right ahead, and I'll give you a cut." And he was immediately contacted by Gene Simmons' lawyers. So negotiations started, and we gave them a price, and they came back with a price they said, Gene wants to make an offer. Gene offers $3,000 and final offer. And I said, well, thank you, but no thank you. I think I can maybe somewhere down the road do a little better on that. So that's where it stands right now. But after KISS in the, I would say very early 80s, we moved to a brand new facility. I think we can move on here. Yeah, and that was the brand new Valley Pinball facility that was in Bensonville, Illinois. And at the time I was promoted to graphics manager, and Paul asked if I knew of any artists to handle the expanding workload. I immediately suggested Greg Ferris, who was still back at the point of purchase design place. And Greg came in, and Paul liked him. And soon after that, Pat McMahon joined us as like an intern from the Art Institute, I believe. And then Tony Ramuni, who had moved from then here, and I think worked some studios, but he was basically grew up in Italy. Soon followed. And let's see what we have next here.
Was that quite a large expansion then in the art department? Because you said there were like 4 or 5 of you, like you, Paul and Dave.
Yes, and as far as designers went, let's see, beyond Greg Kamick, the basic 3 guys who came from the city, Greg Kamick, Jim Patla, Gary Gayton. I think they added Wally Welch, right. Ward Pemberton.
But you also just gave us a lot of names of artists, people like Tony Ramuni and Greg joining. So does that reflect that this was kind of, if you pardon the pun, a bumper age for pinball, that a lot of games were being
Absolutely. I think either KISS or Flash Gordon was the top sellers that I did art for.
I mean, I've got KISS down here as like 17,000.
17,000
and Star Trek wasn't far behind, it's 16,842, so...
That was Star Trek?
Yeah.
Okay. And Flash Gordon was somewhere around 4...
somewhere around here. Flash Gordon, 10,000.
Okay.
So, I mean, those are quite large numbers, because by comparison, the other games of that era were doing around about the 2,000 mark. So those were big hitters.
This was the original sketch that I did for Silver Ball Mania, which was a lot of times I was offered a wide open hand at coming up with a theme. In those days, the designers were very concerned about the way the game was going to play and how it was going to score, and it was the artists had a lot of say in those days on what the theme was going to be. And I had been looking at Heavy Metal Magazine or Zap Comics and some of these old head comics, I guess you'd call them, and there was one artist who did everything in chrome, and I thought, well, let me try my hand at that. So everything was supposed to appear as though it were made out of chrome, and that was magic markers, and I think I did a lot of the shading with colored pencils, all the yellow and blue. I think. Okay, we can move on from that. Flash Gordon was a kind of exciting for me as a young guy. It was a Dino De Laurentiis film, and it was also, early on in licensing, and Tom Neiman was the director of licensing at the time, and he was beginning to bring in, KISS and starting to, expand into these Hollywood.
Just to go off for a moment, I mean, Tom was quite really ahead of his time, because there hadn't been licensed games prior to Tom joining the industries.
I can't think of any.
So he'd come out of university and joined ballet,
Mhm.
and yeah, he started off. I think Wizard
Yeah.
was the first one. So with Flash Gordon, did you have any direct contact with any of the actors?
No, we didn't. That was that was something that became more common with Joe Kamenko.
Okay.
He was a guy who could get into that sort of a situation. Licensing was in a very primitive state at that time, and I know there's a lot of opinions on licensing and where it came from and where it's going. But we still, at the time, licensing wasn't so heavy-handed as it is now. In other words, the licensor themselves want more of a participation in artwork and just the way, even the way the game plays and speech, so on and so forth. So we still had a pretty free rein to do what we wanted at this time. Style guides and getting this had a little booklet, and that was it. Style guides now can be absolutely huge.
I've heard stories that you don't get a book anymore; you get a hard drive full of stuff.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Before you moved on, I had a question about the Pinball Mania.
Okay.
That's what started me in pinball when I was a kid.
Uh-huh.
Back in the early 80s. And me and a bunch of my buddies, we left pinball for a while when we got married and so on. And then I guess it was about 5 years ago, I went to this thing called Da Vinci Days in Corvallis, Oregon. And it was a kind of a Renaissance fair stuff. But within that format, they had documentaries. One of them was called Special Inlet, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So my wife and I went to this, and it got me hooked on pinball again. So I started looking around for pinball machines, and the first one I ever bought was Pinball Mania. How about all to you?
Well,
one of the questions my wife had when I bought this machine was some of the artwork on the back glass, somewhat suggestive. And I was wondering, where did you get some of those ideas from? Because she kind of pointed out a specific area there. What's that about? I was wondering where.
Well, a big influence was Dave Christensen was trying to get away with everything he could, and he did a lot of erasing of ink things. After it would go upstairs to the powers that be, it would come down, and he'd have to do a lot of erasing. So we were trying to push the envelope, but as I mentioned before, Heavy Metal magazine had a lot of sexual innuendo in it, and one in particular, one of the comic strips in there was called Den, and he was a guy who ran around naked all the time, and sort of as a superhero. With his only power was that he had brute strength, I guess. But it was, the comic books were a big influence for us then, and.
So this may not be your original rendition of Silver Ball?
Actually, it went through pretty much as is. I can't see too many changes that I made, and if you look at it now, are there any on the floor? Or, I don't think so.
I don't know. I haven't seen that one on the floor.
It was a fun game for us to play too. We play it, go in the showroom and play it, and it was a fun game.
I think there was a nice integration between the back glass art and the playfield art, cabinet art. It was a really good package.
That's the product of allowing the artist to not be heavy-handedly art directed. When you can, or also not having several different artists work on one game and splitting it apart. If one artist has a vision, he can see it through to the end, and it works out better, I think, that way. You might notice there's on one of these orbs, I had a little self-portrait. I had a beard at the time. I had a little reflection of myself in the orb.
Cool.
And I think also at the time I was driving a Jeep Cherokee, and I might have put that up in the corner of one of the plastics too, so you might see that up there.
I mean, I'm not sure everyone kind of appreciates just how much work there must be in the art of a pinball machine, because often the main focus is the back glass art. But you've got the cabinet, you've got the playfield, and you've got the plastics over the playfield, so quite a lot of work to be done there.
Well, also we had this was sort of a hybrid of your flat screen art, which was all the black line was a flat screen art, and then I have a painting that's all the soft colored parts are airbrushed, and so my airbrush painting doesn't really look like anything without the overlay of the black line on it. And also, this is maybe one of the forerunners of the mirrored screen also. Kiss had a mirrored screen, Flash Gordon had a mirrored screen, and this one went very heavily on it. It was very much outlined with the mirror. So let's move on, I guess, a little bit here. Gordon, there's the original magic marker sketch for Medusa. It's probably about this big right here.
It's quite different from the finished product.
Well, it's magic markers, and I did use a combination of acrylic painting with a brush, and a lot of the background was softly airbrushed, so it was a combination. I had learned airbrush at one of the point of purchase companies I worked for. We would be in a room, all the guys would spray lacquer paint, and in those days, you know, there was no warnings or anything like that, so I really developed like a bronchial
not good.
Yeah, thing from that. So I was still using the lacquers, I think, at Bally, and they had built, especially for me, they built a hood and a fan that blew it out. But I became sick every time I used it, so I had to stop doing that. And I did almost all supersonic was done in.
If people want to get a closer look at the finished product, one of the vendors, I think on the left-hand side of the exhibit hall, has got some reproduction glass. Because there's actually a little bit of controversy that supposedly there's like 9 or 10 glasses of early production where some of the ladies' details are
absolutely
less subtle.
This was Wally Welch's first, and well, he worked on other games, but this is probably what he's known for. And again, artists had a free hand and to do whatever I wanted, and I had been reading a lot of Greek mythology, and I came up with this theme, and everyone liked it, and the rest is history, I guess. Okay, let's move on, see what's next. There's the original.
Question?
Yes?
Do you miss the airbrush?
I don't.
Prefer that, or?
Some of the paintings I've done recently, like fine art paintings, and we'll try to get through this whole thing, and you'll see them at the end. It's mostly, mostly I've used just acrylics and brush. The answer is I don't miss airbrush that much because it was a huge mess. It was buckets and cleaning and constant cleaning and constantly having your airbrush clogged up, and there was just a myriad of messiness to it, and the amount of masking and spraying and masking, cutting masks for hours and hours, and then putting them up there, and we call them friskets or masks. I call them masks. That part I don't miss, no, but I do miss having the opportunity, which I don't have much. I'm pretty busy these days. Just painting with a brush on canvas. That's probably which this I don't believe there's any airbrush whatsoever in the painting of Viking. But this is another area where my point of purchase magic marker skills came into play, and I was able to paint with them and show management what it was going to look like ahead of time. And I don't see too many things that changed. I think I used myself as a model. I was right next to the king with the green outfit on, and I was rather enamored at the time with Brooke Shields. She was very popular at the time, and I intended to put her between those two Vikings, those two orange and yellow Vikings in the back. So that's kind of, you can sort of see that in the final painting.
But there is one on the floor upstairs.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. There was one point where every management was calling for, we want some sort of a head-to-head game or a side-to-side game, and they had designers trying to work on that, and they asked us to come up with themes that had the word double in them. So I had a sort of a Charlie Chan detective theme here called Double Agent. We can move on. There's a pirate theme called Double Deck. That's a magic marker sketch also. Okay, we can move on. There's a Double Dynamite. We had a kind of a Clint Eastwood guy. And let's see what we have next here. After a while in Bensenville, as graphics manager, I was approached with the prospect of becoming a video game designer at Midway. Now, Midway was the building that was right on the same property, but it was just right across a parking lot. And you know, at the time, I thought, well, I'll try this. And, you know, they're doing, you know, they had Pac-Man, and they're doing a lot of great things over there, and just as a change of pace, and they were also offering me an art director job, which was another promotion and more money. And, you know, I was raising a family, and that's what you did at the time. And what I did over there was a lot of storyboarding for video games. The upper corner was a video game for He-Man, which was a toy license. He-Man Masters of the Universe. One over here on the upper right hand was just something I was dreaming up. It was sort of a Road Warrior type of a scrolling video game, driving game, and it was going to be, you'd look at it driving like this, and you'd go up the screen or down the screen as it scrolled this way. That was a Galaga theme that was, you know, instead of being flat, it was going to be a little bit more 3D looking. And we spent a long time against opposition that say we'll never be able to do a flight simulator game. They're never going to happen. But we kept plugging away, and I was building models for a game called Aerocross, and we were, you know, in development with something that we were hoping was going to be a flight simulator game. Pretty common nowadays. And I also did a lot of video graphics. That was the first computer graphics I ever did, was on a game called Spy Hunter.
That's the video.
And that's the video game, yeah. But it was at Midway that I also met a young designer. He was the head of design there at the time, and his name was George Gomez, and we went on to work together and be friends until this very day, which I'm proud to say. Let's see what we have after this to look at. I honestly cannot remember who came to me with this idea, but they said they wanted a pinball. You'd be playing a pinball game. It had flipper buttons on the side, and the ball could continue on into a video portion, which would be projected onto a piece of glass. And I'm like, how the heck? And they just see what you can come up with. And this is what I came up with. I pretty much put the kitchen sink on here. Like, if you got up to the video portion, and you know what I think this was going to be for is a movie called Buckaroo Banzai, and it must have been George's idea. And I think, and I'm going to say that George came up with this idea and implemented on Star Wars Episode 1. or George came up with the idea, and Papa Duke implemented. So.
Do you remember what year this was?
No, but it was during production of Buckaroo Banzai. Do you have? Let's see. No, there's nothing on there. I want to say 85.
It's got to be mid-80s,
Yeah.
presumably,
I'm
because...
going to say 85. And that was probably the first time I had visited a movie set. We visited the movie set of Buckaroo Banzai and met Peter Weller, and he was like, I said, I'm glad to meet you. I'm really impressed with your profession. He's going, are you kidding? I love what you guys do. So that was a compliment. But we were gonna go up to the top and have the ball continue up on the top, and then you'd go into a driving mode. So that's where the gas pedal and the gear shifter and that's very the steering wheel is very George Gomez like at the time. So I'm sure he made probably a little sketch for me, and I did the rest of this. And what was it? Okay. Okay, let's move on. See what we got here. Gary, are you in the audience?
Yeah, I think that's okay.
When did I walk into the Peterson?
Started the company in November of 86.
Okay.
So that would have been early 87.
Yeah, that was my first meeting with Joe Camico, and I met Gary and Joe on the Peterson Avenue, and this is the first game. Okay, and Joe had this idea. We're going to do a photo shoot. We're going to put a photo shoot together, and I did sketches, and the sketches really resemble what we wound up with on this. We had the sets built, and his sister, somebody made costumes, and we felt like we were making a movie. So as you can see by the side, we were still doing stencils, probably at Churchill, and we were happy with it. I was happy with the way it turned out. It wasn't too crazy at first about not being able to do art, but it turned out to be really fun, and I wound up painting that outer space background, and that was our first game together. Let's see what we have next here. Okay, 90s. King Kong. The designer of King Kong was Jerry?
Yeah, Jerry Armstrong.
Jerry Armstrong. But Joe had a lot of input into this on how the game was going to play, and he was guiding Jerry very closely, and he was also...
No, he wasn't.
No? Okay. Well, he was guiding me very closely on the artwork. He said he wanted set in Chicago, and he wanted to put the John Hancock building in there, and also that King Kong would be climbing the Sears Tower, which if I wanted King Kong to be as big as possible and fit everything else in that Joe wanted, helicopters and, a little vignette of Skull Island. But, I wanted King Kong to, show up well, so, proportions on this, I guess King Kong would be like much more giant than he was in any of the movies that you saw. And I guess that girl would be pretty big too. But it's pinball, folks. That's pinball art.
That game never went into production, did it?
No, so you guys probably could tell me better than I how many games were made, or how many exist, or
9.
9 exist, and
No way.
people own them.
No way. 9? I'd be shocked. I'm shocked.
I think I have a couple more shots here. For those who have never seen this, that was the side of the cabinet I was I was pretty happy with the way that turned out, considering all I was able to work with was, I think, black, yellow, and red, and that was it. So I milked black, yellow, and red for everything I could. Let's see, we have maybe some playfield shots here. Yeah, there we got our damsel in distress on the bottom, King Kong coming through the doors, and then it became more modern as you moved up from Skull Island and got back into the Chicago city skyline, and as you could see, it was go Cubs, go Bears, go Bulls, and I can't imagine that came from anywhere but Cam & Co.
I think at the top right, I don't know if you could just see the tip of it, but there's a rather large flipper.
Let's go to the next one. Maybe we'll be able to see that. There's, yeah,
There you go.
king size flipper. Okay. And there was a banana insert up there too. Okay, let's see what we got next.
Since Gary's in the room, can you tell us why that didn't get made?
Wasn't any good. That probably is the only game we never made. I can't say we haven't thrown out a playfield and started from scratch, but that's probably the only one we didn't make. There was a jump.
Yeah.
The ball jumped from that left ramp over. I mean, had to go all the way up that steep ramp that no ball could get up. Jump from the left to the right, and I guess ended up on the, I don't remember it all, but I remember it a little bit because it never got made. That's something.
Okay, let's and really, I can't remember anything that had like a playfield made out of butyrate. That was like a second level made out of butyrate like that one was. Rocky and Bullwinkle, that is the original Magic Marker sketch. And I put a lot of work into that, but I got yelled at one day by Joe when I brought it in. But honestly, I had, at the time, there was no style guides or anything, and what I had recorded on a VCR Rocky and Bullwinkle episodes, and I was stop framing them on my regular TV and photographing them, and that was my style guide at the time. But this parade at the bottom, it would march by, but it would march by like one image at a time. So I had to stop frame, and I drew each one, and then I touched them all up, and I Xeroxed them all different sizes, and lined it up along the bottom. And it was like really tedious work, and I'll never forget coming in there, and Joe was in a worst mood. He was just screaming at people, and I presented the sketch to him, and he said, "What is this? This is a Xerox." He had no idea what had gone into it, and it was, I was pretty close to saying, let's take this and do something with it, Python's a little bit more colorful. You can't follow that guy. Is he in here? No. But I really enjoyed working on this, and I loved the way it looked when it was done. It had a lot of mirroring on it. All the area up behind the frames was mirrored. Behind Boris and Natasha was mirrored. I just thought it looked really sharp when it was done, and I had fun with all of it, the cabinet and the playfield. We can move on. Let's see what else we have here. I was also a big fan of the show. This is the original Magic Marker sketch for Star Trek. Of course, it's for the classic series, and in the middle was the lenticular lens. I had no idea how they were going to do this, but Joe just said, "Give me a painting of the transporter empty, and then just give me a painting of the people separately." So that's what I did, and they pulled it off, I guess, right? I don't see many of these, but that sketch appears to be pretty close to the final I think I may have thrown myself in there at one of the control panels in the back, but that went through pretty much as is. Let's move on. Maybe we have a picture. I don't know if I did include one. No, I didn't. This is the original. We didn't really know what to do with the first. No, this is probably for 35th anniversary. And we, Joe said, why don't you come up with a back glass that would look like a photo shoot? So I whipped together this comp, and let's see what we have next. If I have another marker sketch. Oh no, this is kind of skipping a little bit ahead.
Yeah.
But this is at the photo shoot where we shot Hefner, and this is after, and he was married to, I don't know what number wife it was, but it was after, he had been a bachelor for a long time, I believe, when he married Kimberly. And we went to the Playboy Mansion and did the shoot right out at the pool for the back glass. So it was kind of thrilling for a young guy to be out at the Playboy Mansion, and we had a lot of fun memories out there. Let's see what we have next here. There's the way the back glass turned out. I did do a sketch for that, but I wasn't able to dig it up. Going through old files, I have file cabinets full of sketches and things, and it's very time consuming to go through. But I did do a sketch for this, and it pretty much turned out. We stripped in characters. I'm also in this, next to the girl in the blue bathing suit in the back. I'm sitting at a table, and I put Annie Fanny next to me, and I think the granny character is in there somewhere. Oh yeah, she's in there. She's in the back by Jeff. And there's the Playboy Bunny, and then I had some artwork that was done by, he used to draw Playboy bunnies, and his name was Albert Vargas, I believe. But we shot that scene without Kimberly and Hefner in there, and we stripped them in later. They, to get everybody in position and all that, it would have been tedious, time consuming for them to sit down there and wait for everything, and they didn't have time for that. But pretty amusing. First time we went to talk about this, we went to the Playboy Mansion, and we went into, I believe it was his dining room table, and we were all sitting around the dining room table. And I was like, is this guy gonna come down in his pajamas and slippers? And sure enough, down the stairs, here he comes in pajamas and slippers for our meeting. But it turned out to be a very articulate, the guy's a magazine publisher. He's a really smart guy, and he had great comments on suggestions for us and how to pull off this thing. Okay, let's see what we have next here. This is for a game, the second, I believe this is for the second Playboy machine. And this is a full-blown airbrush painting. I don't know what else I could tell you about it. I guess we'll move on if we don't have any questions. Simultaneously, or actually, Joe started doing a lot of work with a blonde fellow, a blonde-haired artist. He had long hair. What was his name?
The guy in California.
Yeah.
Marcus,
yeah. Joe was doing a lot with him. He was had done movie posters, and Joe was kind of enamored with his style. And at the time, I had been approached by Williams and Bally, to would I like to. I was freelancing at the time. I was finally a freelance artist. After I left Midway, they sort of disbanded the whole operation over there and broke it all up into a different configuration. So I was freelancing at the time when I was doing all the work for Gary and Joe. And so I'd been asked to come in and work with John Trudeau. I think the first game I did over there as a freelancer was Creature from the Black Lagoon. You know, great theme. John had the vision of, you know, incorporating the 50s drive-in with, you know, the movie theme, which worked out pretty well, you know, sound-wise and everything else. But this is a picture of us. John Trudeau is in the red shirt, visiting a set of the Bedrock movie set, which was in a canyon, quarry. And that's Roger Sharp, of course. You all might recognize him. But we had fun just running around the Bedrock set. We had, you know, just like a bunch of kids running around in there one day. We went up in some of the buildings and looked out the windows, and there's the Rock Donalds in the background, and it was just kind of a dusty, empty set that day. There was nothing going on. We just had fun. We can move on, I guess. There's Flintstones. Backglass. I'm sure I have a magic marker sketch for that I did first. There was a movie poster artist who was doing all the Lucas stuff. His name was Drew Struzan, and I was trying to emulate his style at the time, so there was a lot of, you know, he almost drew the whole thing out. The way he would do it is he'd draw everything out in colored pencil, and then he'd just add airbrush and, you know, paint touches. I did all the portraits of the lead characters were, you know, very carefully done with a brush. But a lot of the rest of it is just kind of like freehand airbrush. Down below, the speaker panel consisted of a painting of all the cars at the drive-in, and then we silk screened the speaker panels. You know, just a two-color, just black and another color. And I threw you know, John Trudeau and I had talked about, what it was like to work with Joe and so on. And he said, you know, just for grins, put a Joe's Diner in there, you know. So as you can see, one of the Buterets, there is a Joe's Diner down there. And I think I even have the Picasso in the back. I have the team dressed up in Flintstone garb, and right next to that is the Picasso. This is, you know, mostly John Trudeau is asking me. I actually have this game, and I kept it for two reasons. One of the reasons was that John let me have a lot of input, and so, you know, I did a lot of sketches and things for the side, sculptures and the dinosaur sculpture, and he really let me go to town on the playfield and do, you know, he was one of the first guys that would say, well, if the inserts don't fit the way you envision the art, I'll change the inserts around. In the days of Gary Gayton and Jim Patlow, you'd be given a playfield ahead of time. It was completely done, and it was not going to change. All you would do is apply art to it. This was a little different situation. We started moving inserts around to fit the art a little bit better. So I kept that, and the other reason I kept it was I have a backglass signed by John Goodman, Rick Moranis, and some of the other stars, and it's right on the glass. So I know I kept that one. We can move on, see what else we have here. I also, during my freelance time, I was a product designer for a company called Inesco, and they did giftware, and they had a lot of fun projects, and I got some samples. I would do, for instance, they'd say, oh, we want a stylized 50s car, and then after that we want you to do little illustrations of hot dogs, diners, or something like that. So that kept me busy too during my freelance days. We can move on from there. Monster Bash, that was also a game I did as a freelancer. It was a Williams game. I think it was originally going to be a Bally game. And George was the designer, and really he came with, he had a lot of ideas of course, mechanical things. that he wanted to do on the play field, and showed me what characters we were going to feature, but there was a time where we really didn't know what was going to happen. Of course, I was playing in a band at the time. I was really lobbying to put the monsters in a band together. And so I came up with this painting, and I had ideas for how their guitars would look and so on and so forth. Other things of interest were, I had a self-portrait in this one also. This character's me. My wife at the time modeled for that. That was my daughter. And we had Elvis up in front. He's part of the crowd. That's about it. And I used my wife at the time posed for pictures for the woman who's the creature's carrying. And I think I threw Elvira in there somewhere in the back just as a tribute to what Greg was doing. Okay, we can move on from there unless you have any questions. Star Wars Episode 1, I would have to say it's probably the most intricate art that I did at the time, up to that time. And again, I was trying to emulate the Star Wars, the official Star Wars artist, Drew Struzan. So this is when we started really getting a lot of style guide stuff and a lot of direction from the licensor. And it was just a lot of images to put together in some sort of cohesive way, not being able to see the movie. We did travel to the Skywalker Ranch, which is another thrilling adventure for me. You know, being in a facility where sort of your heroes worked, you know. So we were able to read the script in a sequestered room, and so we were able to identify what the images were from that, but you really couldn't see any of the movie. It's, you know, I put a lot of work in. It was very time consuming, and for this I did 3 paintings that are 30 by 40 paintings. I no longer have them. They're all bought by Lucas, and they are scattered throughout his different facilities. I was able to see one. I went to their facility with John Borg on one occasion, and it was for the game Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. Or maybe it was all 3 of them. Maybe it was all 3 of them, but at the time they were making Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. And I just asked the license person if there was any way that she would know where my paintings wound up, and she was like, yeah, there's one down the hall over here. So it was pretty nice. I got to, you know, see it in the hallways of Lucas. So I did 3 paintings, and they were all the same size, and they bought the first one, and they decided on one of the next 2. We can move on. And these were for the cabinet sides, and so they bought the next one that you'll see, but we can look at this one for a second. This one was also very time consuming. You know, I was not working on the computer at the time, so I had to repeat all these battle droids. I drew each and every one of them and painted each and every one of them, going all the way down the line as far as I could go until they got to nothing. And let's move on to the next one. But you could see, as you can see, this was the left side of the cabinet, so it came like this. But I made the full painting out of it. But this left side came like this, and then when you see this one, this is the right side, and it moves this way. And they actually chose to buy this one from me. I said, well, you know, this is a set. So I said, and actually I painted them so when you put them together, the nebula and stuff flows from one into the next one. So when they saw them together next to each other, they said, oh, absolutely. So we'll take all three of them. So that was a little windfall, I guess you'd call it. But here, another really intricate painting for me, very time consuming. The most complicated part was actually that little city down on the bottom. I went to, if you were able to see the painting or maybe get up close to a translite, I have some proofs at home that are the size of a little bit bigger. But you could see a lot of work in there. I just put a lot of work into that little city down there, and I started into it, and a day would go by, another day would go by, another day, and I'm still not finished. I'm still drawing and painting and, noodling away, basically. So pretty much how indication of how my days go.
It's obviously a tough life, having to do all that and fit in visits to Bedrock, Playboy Mansion. I'm
playing in a band. I'm playing in a band at night.
Right. So obviously, you're kind of going above and beyond what's necessary to get the art out. Can you tell us about the time you dressed as a Star Wars character?
Yeah, that was. John Papaduke said that there's gonna be a video portion. Of course, that was the Pinball 2000, and there was gonna be. I did a lot of storyboards for different sequences that were gonna be in it, and he said there was gonna be a battle between this Darth Maul character and a Qui-Gon Jinn character, the Liam Neeson character, and he said, would I like to play the Darth Maul character? I thought about it for about a millisecond and told him, yeah, I'd do it. And little realizing what it would entail, and it wound up with me taking lessons from a martial artist instructor on, being able to do a sort of like a sequence of Kenpo or some sort of but it was basically stick fighting, which is what Darth Maul does with his double-edged lightsaber. And so, that was the first step. The second step was, well, we don't have a mask, Lucas won't give us a mask, so I went out and bought sort of a blank mask. I was actually lucky to find it. I painted the whole thing up and made all the horns out of styrofoam, painted them, so it really looked pretty good. I still have it. And then by the time you got to where the video was kind of grainy and all that stuff, you really couldn't tell that it looked pretty good. And then the shooting, the day of the actual shoot, I had a black outfit, I had some black boots, I had bought black motorcycle gloves, and I got there and they had gotten a mask. And it was a rubber mask, and it completely covered my whole face, and it had very difficult to breathe in, and I was drenched. And we went on for hours and hours doing fight sequences, and I'd swipe under him, and he'd jump, and I'd spin the thing above my head and to the side. And it went on for hours, and I had to keep taking breaks because I couldn't breathe for one, and the other, I was just soaked. I'd have to just wipe myself down because it was just a rubber mask with absolutely no ventilation in it whatsoever. But again, just one of those.
One of the things you do for your art.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's see what else we have here. We can probably move on. Okay. I play guitar, and I play like a Hawaiian lap steel guitar, which is, pretty typical instrument of the old 50s, even back to the 40s, rockabilly style country players. It's not a steel guitar that's on the floor. I can stand up, play my guitar, and then walk right over to it. I have it like on a keyboard stand and play it. It's an 8-string instrument. And you know, I started playing guitar probably a little bit before the Beatles came out. When I was probably 12 or 13, we had a guitar, and you know, Beach Boys and Jan and Dean were out, and just I loved the sound of it, and just we taught ourselves, and that was big. There was no tutorials you could see on YouTube or anything else, and you know, my parents sure were not going to give me lessons to go, you know, play guitar like those nuts on TV. You know, so we just taught ourselves. And let's move on here.
We have 10 minutes.
Okay.
10 minutes.
Okay, let's see what we have in 2000 here. Let's move on. Pirates of the Caribbean. This is a composite that had a style guide, and this is the point where licensors were starting to get a heavier hand in what things were going to look like. But we put this together, and I put this together on the computer and retouched it, and it turned out okay. I mean, I like it. So.
How long do you get to do something like that? How long do, I guess, Stone give you?
Oh, geez, the whole game, we probably put it all together maybe 4 months, which, believe me, when I started out, you know, doing, you know, back at Bally in the old days, you'd take a year. I'd have a year to do artwork, you know. Let's move on and see what we have so we can keep going here. I'm just going to show you the way we would present games to licensors. We would just give them a layout like this, which would show them basically what the game was going to look like all together. Let's move on. 24. There's another layout for NBA I did with George Gomez. Rolling Stones, that's how we presented that to them. This is a comp I did for, I had the opportunity, I was approached by a company in California, and they asked me if I would, they wanted to do a sign in Times Square, which it's a 6-story sign. It's right in the middle of Times Square. The customers, Coca-Cola, and they had this very abstract-looking sign, and these are all empty spaces that I had to work around, but they wanted me to design a pinball machine that they would animate, and this is what I came up with. And the idea was that when you would hit the hamburger, it would, you know, fly up in the air, and the components, you know, the lettuce and everything, and then it would come back, and the popcorn would fly up when you hit the targets, you know, in an animated fashion, and so on and so forth. So let's see what else I have on this. I have a.
Is the video of that available on YouTube?
I don't believe so. Okay. No. This is a picture that Joe just. I did wind up going there, and I called the company, and they said, well, if it's not running, just call us and we'll put it up there. But I think I was there, I might have been there with you, Gary, in New York, and we actually saw it live, and I shot some pictures, but I think Joe shot this picture here. But yes, another, just a crazy request from somebody, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do it, I'll just start into it. And I said yes to just about everything at the time. Let's see what else we have here. This is some of the work I did at IGT. When Joe approached me and said, I'm going to move into gaming and you know, grab onto my coattails, and I said, well, you know, I don't really want to move away from my family, and you know, my mom's getting older and so on and so forth. He says, well, I'll hire you as an off-site employee, which was something pretty new that he had to push past, but it worked out great for me. I didn't have to move, and I was able to work for IGT and expand my you know, what I did. Let's move on. We weren't able to use Pugsley and the girl, so I used my daughter and my nephew, their faces. You know, I did a lot of portraits for them. And I'd still not really done a lot of computer work. I was just dipping into it. So this right here, I painted these in airbrush, as well as the Addams Family. Okay, let's move on so we can move quickly. I did a lot of work for IGT on just conceptual stuff. At the time, we were doing a lot of sculptured toppers. Dave Link, who did a lot of work in the pinball industry of sculpts and still probably does to this day, did a lot of this stuff. But we did all these elaborate toppers and sculpture facades, and we could customize the chair if you want. Just like be creative. Let's see what else we have here. We'll move on. I do a lot of large sign. Since I had a sort of a sign background when I began in studios, I kind of fit right into making some of these signs that would go over a big bank of targets. And that was fun for me too. So let's move on. 2010, okay. There's another layout, the presentation. At this point, I was doing pretty well on the computer, and I started doing my portrait paintings for IGT on the computer. And George came back and said the licensor says we don't want to use, these were all photographs from Style Guide. Licensor said we don't want to use straight photographs. We want them to match the style of the Batman, which was a computer-generated art, a flat art. And so I did all these paint overs. So I had fun doing that, doing paint overs. That was for the Stern Pinball. Avatar was a heavy Style Guide game, except for when it came to the play field. But this is we went through several iterations to finally get a successful lenticular back glass for this. I can tell you that was and it was a fun game to work on. It was something, very different movie, very visual. And we go X-Men. I did a lot of cabinet work, and this is during the time Stephen Jensen came to Stern, and so we were doing a lot of collaboration, and he was kind of doing half the stuff and making suggestions to me on how I could. He had a lot of art direction, and it was fine with me. I was working, and I'm happy no matter what. But this started out X-Men. Did X-Men start? No, this was always going to be a comic book X-Men. Yeah. Redemption. Over the years, I've done a lot of Redemption games. Colorama for Bromley. Rock and Roll was a game you would see in arcades all the time. I'd take my daughter there and say, "Here, Daddy did this, and here's where I put your name, honey, right in here," And she'd play the games there, like at Chuck E. Cheese type things. Let's move on and just show you a couple more. Derby Dash and Turf Champ. They would say, "We're going to use the same cabinet again, get some more mileage out of it, put another game in there." But the art was always different, so I was always busy, doing more art. This one was just, Lauren Bromley came and said, "We're just going to do a shooting game," and I had free reign to come up with an idea, and I sold her on a zombie theme, and I like the way it turned out. Here again, there's always some limitations. I think she said you can have black in two colors, and you can back it up with white. So.
What is that, a budgetary thing? Why restrict your colour palette?
Well, on the side of the cabinet, they weren't four color. It was silk screen, and so every time you added another screen color,
costs more.
Yeah, it costs more. So, Little Pro. The only thing that I knew about this game is that it was going to have that little golfer on there, and that's all I knew. I said, well, let's make it, we can make this into a miniature golf game, and you know, we can have the windmill and you know, the typical, the castle, and you know, the alligator mouth, things I had seen at miniature golf. So I don't know, they didn't want to get the playfield too complicated, but it was fun for me to sort of have a little bit of a say on how the rest of the game was going to look, the Buterits and all that. And I have a lot of, done a lot with this company. They redid Seawolf, and I did several different versions of that. And that was kind of fun. Celebrity sightings, I had more of these, but let's see what we got here. There's Clint Eastwood up there. It's just, you get the opportunity over the years, it's to, you know, bump into people and be places that you never thought you'd be ever in your life. And, you know, it's kind of a thrill standing right next to Anne Margaret, and, you know, my artwork with featuring her and Elvis behind there is right there. And she's married to Roger Smith, who was, I'm going to say he was in 77 Sunset Strip, which was a black and white TV show back in the 60s. But he's the guy with the fishing hat, and he was carrying around a little basket with her dog in it, a little wicker basket. Go figure that. There's Dick Clark. That's his office. It's worse than mine as far as memorabilia and toys all over the wall. It was just filled with interesting things and from throughout his life, and it's a thrill to meet him. That's Tina Sinatra, the daughter of Frank Sinatra, and that's standing out in front of her office. And she had on the outside of her office, she had this horse's head with, it was paint, but it looked like blood dripping down the side, and it was, I would imagine that's a reference to the horse head in The Godfather. So she had her little bit. These are some of my fine art paintings. They're all really, that's a really big, that's probably about 4.5 feet tall painting of the Beatles, and these are done for a gallery, like a Thomas Kincaid gallery that was making what they call G-clay on canvas. In other words, they print on canvas, and it looks very much like the painting when they're done. So these were all celebrities. That's what they wanted me to do. They wanted Rolling Stones, Beatles. We can move on. That was the kind of cover for Goldfinger. I reproduced that, and just, I didn't do any of these. There isn't any airbrush on it. It's all just fine art with a brush and on canvas. Three Stooges, that's an airbrush painting I did for IGT. That's got a lot of airbrush on it. That is my painting. Yeah, I think that's my painting. There are two pieces that I did digitally, and I also wound up painting them for the gallery, and that was this Elvis, and the other one's Pirates of the Caribbean. Let's move on. That's the painting I did for Pirates of the Caribbean. It's 30 by 40 on illustration board, and that's a very wide picture of the Chicago skyline, Navy Pier. That took me absolutely forever. Every window's painted, all the reflections and stuff, it just took forever. And I guess that's my Marilyn Monroe I have hanging in my basement. And I think that's probably it. In conclusion, I'd really like to thank all the people who supported me through the years. Gary Stern, Joe Camico, Larry DeMar, everyone who plays pinball. It's been quite a journey, from mansions and movie sets, backstage passes, to hobnobbing with celebrities, but most of all, I would like to thank all the people who supported pinball through the years. It wouldn't have been possible, any of this for me, without pinball. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.